Yami Beito translates to dark jobs, illegal part-time work, found through social media and online platforms. People looking for quick cash may be hired to threaten, transport, beat, or even kidnap someone, often without fully realizing what they're getting into. On October 16, 2024, a woman in Yokohama noticed her neighbor's windows smashed and called the police. Inside, officers found the body of 75-year-old Joharu Gota. He was tied up with tape, severely beaten, and his house was ransacked. The attackers stole about 200,000 yen in cash and 300,000 yen worth of jewelry. Joharu Gota was a quiet, harmless man with no enemies. Soon after, police arrested the first suspects, not gang members, but young people hired online through Yami Beito ads. One of them, Masuki Takarada, admitted he took part after responding to an online job posting. Another suspect, a woman named Miyota, was found with some of the stolen money. She claimed she didn't know it came from a crime and was paid to hold it. Despite the arrests, police never identified the person who hired them. That's the danger of Yami Beito. These ads appear on normal sites like Twitter, job boards, and even Discord chats, offering quick cash for vague, higher-risk tasks. Desperate students or unemployed people take the bait, while the real organizers stay anonymous, leaving Yami Beito a growing and troubling phenomenon in Japan.
TikTokers who've recorded their final moments. The Inquisitor, that's what this TikToker called himself, used to film his videos, dressed as Ghost from Call of Duty. He gained a pretty large following thanks to his entertaining content. At some point, a 17-year-old girl messaged him, offering to help edit his videos, and he agreed. She really did edit them well, but as a person, she seemed not great. Later, their chat revealed much more. From the very beginning, she told him she was already an adult. After that, she started flirting with him. The Inquisitor told her he wasn't interested in anything romantic and suggested they just remain good friends. But one day, he made a fatal mistake. Wanting to thank her for the good video edits, he wrote that he loved her, clarifying that he meant it as a friend only. The girl then cut and edited parts of the conversation, making it look completely different, and sent it to her boyfriend, who is also a TikToker with a million-plus audience. Almost immediately, the boyfriend posted a video accusing the Inquisitor. From that moment, a massive wave of hate, threats, and harassment fell on him. As it later turned out, the Inquisitor struggled with certain mental health issues, and all the accusations, lies, and betrayal hit him very hard emotionally. He stepped away from social media for a while. After some time, he started a live stream. During the stream, viewers saw someone breaking his window. It turned out to be his neighbor, trying to get inside to save him. He called an ambulance, but it was too late. To this day, nobody understands the motivation of the 17-year-old girl, or her boyfriend, why they did it, and why they destroyed the life of an innocent young man.
Dark threads from 4chan. October 20th, 2020. An anonymous user created a thread with a pretty silly question. This guy is wearing a mask inside his apartment. What the heck? The op attached a photo of a couple lying on a couch, watching something on a laptop. It was during the COVID era people wore masks outside, but the anon sarcastically asked why someone would wear a mask inside their own home. The thread was posted on PLL, so of course the first thing users noticed was that the girl in the photo looked Asian. But then someone asked the actual important question, why are you taking pictures through someone else's window? A very good point. Looking at the photo, you can clearly see it was taken from outside, through a window. Some users guessed that the op was photographing neighbors from the building across from his hut. The op then explained that the apartment belonged to the girl in the picture, who he claimed was an Instagram blogger. Naturally, that raised even more questions. Someone asked, how did you take a photo from her balcony without getting caught? The op answered that it was a high-rise building and he used a drone to spy on the girl from a distance. To prove it, he posted a screenshot of what he claimed was the girl's Instagram story. In the story, she wrote that she felt scared and uncomfortable after seeing a drone hovering right outside her window. This drone flew up and stopped right by my window. Is this even legal? After posting that, the op disappeared from the thread. No more replies, no explanation. Users were left trying to piece things together. Some people doubted the authenticity of the story because in the Instagram screenshot, the girl's avatar and username were blurred and nobody could find her account. Also, the decorations in her apartment looked slightly different between the photo and the story. But if you look closely at the OP's window photo, you can see the drone's reflection. So the op was definitely connected to the Instagram account of the girl being watched. Unfortunately, that's where the trail ends.
On June 3, 1991, in Albuquerque, a truck driver named Eduardo checked into a hotel for the night. He paid cash and took a double room, even though he was alone. By the next morning, he still hadn't checked out, and a security guard went to investigate. A "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on the door, but no one answered. After opening the door with a screwdriver, the guard found nothing unusual at first, just beer, cigarettes, and everyday items. But in the bathroom, he made a horrifying discovery: the body of a woman hanging from the shower head with a luggage strap. She had been dead since the day Eduardo arrived. Inside her body, they found traces of illegal substances and a photograph of her with a man. Staff recognized the man as Eduardo, but 2 years later, when police located Eduardo's relatives, they claimed the man in the photo wasn't him at all. This raised a chilling question. If the man wasn't Eduardo, then who was he? Investigators found drug-weighing scales labeled George Martinez, suggesting the woman may have died during a drug deal gone wrong. Years later, police received a tip that the woman might have been named Becca from California, but the identity of the man in the photo remains unknown to this day.
Unsolved horror: what happened at Lake Bodom? In the summer of 1960, 4 Finnish teenagers set up a tent beside the quiet waters of Lake Bodom, near Helsinki. By morning, something terrible had happened. 3 never woke up, and 1 survivor, 18-year-old Niels Gustafsson, was found outside the tent, badly hurt but alive. The scene was pure confusion. The tent had collapsed, their things were scattered, and investigators struggled to piece together what went wrong. No clear evidence, no weapon, no answers. Decades passed. In 2004, Niels was suddenly accused after new forensic testing, but a year later, he was found innocent. The truth had slipped away again. Today, no one knows what really took place at Lake Bodom. Was it a stranger in the night, a friend, or something no one wants to believe? The mystery still haunts Finland, whispered about in books, documentaries, and even music. Lake Bodom remains one of Scandinavia's most chilling, unsolved stories.
The chilling story of Joshua Phillips, the Florida boy who murdered his 8-year-old neighbor when he was just 14. On November 3, 1998, Josh Phillips murdered little Maddie Clifton in Jacksonville, Florida, then stashed her body underneath his bed and slept just above her corpse for a week before it was found. Joshua Phillips had only just become a teenager when he moved to the Lakewood suburbs of Jacksonville, Florida. For his parents, who were both computer specialists, the quiet community of fewer than 7,000 residents was an idyllic change. Phillips, meanwhile, became a lonely C-average student who spent much of his spare time watching adult videos at home. However, he did befriend his 8-year-old neighbor Maddie Clifton to horrifying results. For Maddie Clifton, on the other hand, Lakewood was the only neighborhood she had ever known. Born on June 17, 1990, her loving parents, Steve and Sheila, had no reason not to let Clifton roam the safe and sun-soaked streets on her own. But while Maddie Clifton and Joshua Phillips had played together many times before, November 3, 1998, would be the last. Joshua Phillips was in the front yard playing baseball when Clifton crossed the street to join him. He claimed to have agreed since both of his parents were at work, but then accidentally hit her in the eye with his ball. Scared of the consequences, he dragged the crying girl into his house and then strangled and hit her with his bat. Desperate to silence her before his father got home, Phillips shoved her unconscious body under his bed. Her mother reported Clifton missing at 5 p.m., but she would never be seen alive again. When she regained consciousness and started to moan around sundown, Phillips removed his mattress and did the unspeakable. Phillips used his multi-purpose Leatherman tool on her body before placing his waterbed mattress back on the bed frame. Baffled authorities and Lakewood residents searched high and low for the missing girl. On the first night of her disappearance, even Phillips joined in. While police searched his home 3 times, they mistook the stench of Clifton's body for the smell of birds that Joshua Phillips kept in his room. A lack of answers from the 2-street neighborhood spurred the FBI to join, while hundreds of volunteers searched the forests and swamps and handed out flyers offering a $100,000 reward. Hopes of Clifton's safe return were dashed in the early morning of Tuesday, November 10th. Dunphy had noticed an unusual wet spot on her son's bedroom floor before noting that part of his bed frame was broken and taped together. That's when she saw Clifton's lifeless legs and frantically ran out to speak to the police. The 15-year-old was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Why do so many older men love traveling to Southeast Asia? We all see beautiful photos on social media about affordable tourism in Vietnam, the Philippines, Thailand, and Laos, and there really is a lot to admire. Exotic cuisine, fresh fruit, five-star hotels, and breathtaking beaches. The list of advantages is long, but is everything truly as perfect as it seems? And what about the people who actually live there? Quite often, you can notice unusual couples walking down the streets, an older foreign man closely accompanied by a much younger local woman, in cafes, by the hotel pool, at the beach. If you don't pay attention, they blend into the flow of tourists. But if you look closer, love, of course, can happen at any age, but there are limits. Many of these women do not choose this life because of comfort. Some lack economic opportunities, some don't even have passports, and not all of them are in situations where they can freely make choices about their future. And everyone understands this, even if they pretend not to. So is this the real reason many men travel there? Not just to find an obedient wife, but to fulfill desires they would never openly pursue at home. The responsibility lies not only with those seeking such relationships, but also with the systems and governments that allow entire generations of women to be placed in vulnerable positions in the name of economic growth.
The Man Who Amassed, a collection of mummified girls. Anatoly Moskvin seemed like a smart guy. The college professor and Russian journalist mastered 13 languages, but he also had a peculiar hobby. He was a self-dubbed necropolist, or an expert on cemeteries. Moskvin was so fascinated by cemeteries, in fact, that he visited 752 of them in and around his hometown. He wrote lengthy reports with titles like Great Walks Around Cemeteries and What the Dead Said that were published in a weekly newspaper called Apparently, this curiosity was tied directly to an incident from his childhood, which he divulged in his last contribution to the paper on October 26, 2011, when Moskvin was 13. A group of men stopped him and forced him to join a funeral, and to kiss the lifeless 11-year-old girl on the lips. I kissed her once, then again, he wrote. The girl's mother then placed a wedding ring on his and her daughter's fingers. Moskvin wrote that his strange marriage was useful and spurred an irrevocable, lifelong fascination with the dead. Moskvin began writing about the deceased and taking detailed notes of each cemetery he visited. He even spent a night in the coffin of a dead person ahead of their funeral. It was when locals found the graves of their loved ones desecrated and dug up in 2009 that Moskvin's hobbies became untenable. The Russian government had no leads, but they were sure extremists were to blame. Until 2011, nobody had any inkling who the culprit in this bizarre horror story was. When they arrested him at home, they found countless life-size dolls littered the apartment, which Moskvin shared with his parents. The dolls' hands were covered in fabric, and makeup covered their faces. It quickly became apparent that these were not inanimate objects. These were the mummified corpses of human girls. When police tried to move them, music began to blare. Moskvin had embedded music boxes into the chest cavities of these dolls. A dried human heart and a piece of a gravestone were found in the home as well. The corpses were stuffed with rags, their eye sockets filled with buttons or toy eyes. Moskvin said he would watch cartoons with them, and that he dug them up because he was lonely. He said his biggest dream was to have children, and that he'd been waiting for science to figure out how to revive the dead. His parents had no idea. They assumed their son had a hobby of building large playthings. In court, their son confessed to 44 counts of abusing graves and bodies. Austrian Dungeon Dad. I was addicted to incest.
It had seemed an innocent enough request. Could she help him hoist a door into its frame? Elizabeth Fritzl followed her father down into the bowels of the cellar that he had been building for months in the garden beneath the family home. Elizabeth climbed down the stairs into the cellar and helped him fix the door in the dusty confines of his underground creation. As she turned to leave, a piece of cloth soaked in ether was held over her mouth and nose, and her world went dark, possibly forever. It was a deeply cruel start to an unbelievably cruel deed. How could Elizabeth have known that she was helping her own father install the final building block to his plans to lock her up as his slave? Fritzl had been planning what was effectively a dungeon for years, receiving official permission to construct his cellar complex. She was living under their feet, beneath the garden where he and the rest of the family enjoyed barbecues in the summer. Over the next 24 years, the horror for Elizabeth was unrelenting. The cold, the damp, the rats, which she was sometimes forced to catch with her bare hands, the water that ran off the walls in such large quantities she had to use towels to soak it up. Summer, when the place turned into an intolerable, sweaty sauna, was the worst time of year. Over the course of nearly a quarter of a century, he at least 3,000 times, resulting in 7 babies who themselves often had to watch the abuse as they grew older. 3 of these children were to stay underground, never seeing daylight until their release in April last year. One of the children, a twin called Michael, died shortly after his birth in the cellar in 1996. He had severe breathing difficulties and expired in his mother's arms when he was just 66 hours old. All births took place without any medical help. To prepare for them, her father provided her with disinfectant, a dirty pair of scissors, and a 1960s book on childbirth. Fritzl often threatened Elizabeth and her children, warning them that if they tried to escape, they would be killed. He would punish her by switching off all the power to the cellar for days at a time, so she was left alone in total darkness. The end of her ordeal came last April when Kirsten, her 19-year-old daughter, became gravely ill. Fritzl, not known for his mercy in the past, put her in his Mercedes and drove her to hospital. There, the doctors became deeply suspicious of the deadly pale creature with bad teeth who lay dying in intensive care. At the hospital, Elizabeth was whisked into a room away from her father, where police threatened to charge her with child abuse because of the way she had clearly neglected her daughter. Elizabeth said she had a completely different tale from the one they expected to hear. She would start to tell them only on condition they promised her she would never have to set eyes on her father again.
The youngest serial killer. The mystery of serial killers' psychology remains unsolved, though psychiatrists have identified several early signs that may indicate such tendencies in childhood, including cruelty to animals, bedwetting, and fascination with fire. These traits form what's known as the MacDonald Triad, proposed by Dr. John MacDonald in the 1960s. However, not every person showing these traits becomes a murderer, and not all serial killers display them. The question of what happens in a child's mind when they harm others remains deeply disturbing. One of the youngest known cases that shocked the world occurred in 2007 in the Indian state of Bihar, involving a boy named Amarjit Sada, who was only 8 years old when police charged him in connection with the deaths of several children. He came from an extremely poor family living in a rural area where children were often left unsupervised. Reports describe him as a quiet and solitary child. Little is known about what triggered his violent behavior, but psychological experts later described him as emotionally detached and lacking a sense of right and wrong. According to local reports, his family was aware of his actions but kept silent out of fear and shame. The truth surfaced only after the disappearance of another local child, which led to a police investigation. Psychologists later studied his case as an example of early-onset psychopathy, emphasizing the importance of early detection, trauma support, and mental health care, especially in impoverished and neglected environments. Unofficial accounts claim that after several years in a juvenile facility, Amarjit was eventually released with a new identity once he reached adulthood, though this information has never been officially confirmed.